So good morning and welcome out to another chilly morning. I'm over at Llanberis near Compton. I'm at the Lone Tree. I know what you're all going to say, not again. Why is it the Lone Tree? Well, my plan was heading to sort of the south part of the Yorkshire Dales yesterday, and you have to excuse the background noise. They're actually working on the car park, so there's builders working. My plan was to go up to up to Yorkshire Dales and do some sort of round Malham and Skipton. But at this time of the year, at this time of whenever I'm videoing this, the weather is extremely strange and we are in some serious minus temperatures. And because of that, I bottled it and I thought, well, I know there's some really steep hills over there. My van will not do very well in steep hills. So I plumped for coming over to North Wales, and I thought I'd start off with a tree just to have a look and see if it's a bit different to anything else. And to be honest, it is. I've never shot it with snow on the mountains. I've got snow all over the mountains. Snowdon's under some low cloud at the moment, covered in snow. The lake is low. Padan is quite low, which isn't a problem because it gives me the chance. I'm trying to zoom in on it to try and draw the mountains in a bit closer. But there's some snow just on the route section, which just makes it a little bit different to the normal picture. But what I want to do is I want to do a video on. This is going to be about my processing. I'm going to take an image, a couple of images, and then we're going to go home, we'll process them, and I'm going to show you how I start and finish the image, hopefully, how I bring out some of the shadows, how I control the highlights, and hopefully give you an insight on that. So I'm going for a very simple image. I've not actually put the tree right back in, in that bottom of that V this time. I've sort of pushed it over to the mountains slightly. Because the mountains are white, it's still standing out. So I've got a slightly different composition than I normally would, and like I say, I'm zooming in. I'm at 24, which is about 50 mil on a full frame, so it's pulling them mountains in a little bit. I might even try going back a little bit further, but yeah, the water level's pretty low at the moment. So we'll see how we get on and get a couple of shots of this, and then we'll do a processing video for you and let you know how we get that done. So we're getting a bit of a strange phenomenon for me. We're actually getting some pinks in the sky, which is quite nice, to be honest, because I don't normally get colour when I'm at the tree. And if you remember in that last video I did when I was here, and I think I said this tree's never alone. It's not. Look at this, there's a gentleman here again today. This tree never spends a weekend on its own, ever. But still, it's one of those places that's easy to get to, and you see the images and everyone seems to want to get their own take on it as well. So this might be quite nice with a little bit of colour in the background. Again, I'd like to be further back and put a zoom lens on it because I'd love to pull in those mountains and the colours closer to the tree. But as you go back, you go uphill slightly, and it's very, very difficult to get that zoom in. Once I'm happy with this last shot that I get, I may just flip the lens over, drop the tripod right down as low as I can. But because when you get that close, some of the trees seem to catch the corners. I'm not sure how much pink we're getting at, but there's definitely some pink in the old background there. It looks pretty good. Well, the sky has kicked off quite nicely, and I did move the camera back. I've dropped it right down low as I possibly can. I'm on this little baby Leo photo, the little blue titanium one this weekend. I just picked it up after do you know what, I'm just going to go out with a nice little lightweight tripod because I probably won't even use the tripod much this weekend. But things like this, when it's still quite dark, you just need it to control those shutter speeds a little bit. So by moving back and putting the 55mm lens on, I'm zoomed in a little bit more, around sort of 40mm on my camera. And it's just nice to have those colours behind, and the snow on the mountains is really nice. I don't get to see, like I say, the pinks and the colours at the tree very often, so it's just going to make it slightly different. And the other reason I bought this little tripod is I still haven't got the L bracket or a bracket on my X-T5 yet because they haven't come out and I'm still waiting for them. So I thought I'd bring a tripod that's got a ball head and I can flip it over to a vertical then, and that makes a difference because this shot really needed to be shot vertical. So I think I'll process this one because this has definitely got some nice colours in it, and it's a little bit different to what I'm normally used to getting. No reflection, just tree and sky, and I think this would be really quite pretty. God, this cold weather's really taking effect on the camera batteries and stuff like that, but needs must as the devil drives and all that. I'm just walking back to the van, and I think I'll see you back in the office on the computer and show you what we can do with those images, how to bring out the shadows, control the highlights, and make the best of the image you're taking. So I'll see you back there. Okay, so you can see that I'm in Lightroom now, and I've just imported the images. Now, if you don't use Lightroom, to import your images into Lightroom, you have to go on to Import, and then you look for where your photographs, down this side, where your photographs are in, the folder they're in. Mine are in Snowdon Snow, because that's what we've been doing. And then once you've selected that folder, you pick all your images, just select them all and click on import. Mine's grayed out because I've already done them, and then they suddenly appear in this folder called Snowdon, as you can see there. Now, as we looked through these photographs, you'll see that I've got a normal exposure and then a couple of different exposures. So pretty much what you're looking at this one, is that's my normal exposure. This is 2 overexposed, this is 1 overexposed, this is 1 underexposed, and this is 2 underexposed. And that's how I've got my bracketing set up. You can see the next set, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that's how my bracketing's set up. So I'm just going to flick through these photographs, and you can see here there's a difference as well. You can see that I've got these nice cool images all above us, and then suddenly as the sky changed, the images have gone warm. Now this is because I've been using automatic white balance. Shouldn't really use auto white balance. When you're shooting in RAW, it doesn't matter because you can put that right anyway, but when you're looking through images, it gives a completely false reading. So you should shoot your white balance pretty much on a basic setting. Even if you just set it to 5,200 Kelvin or something, at least then they would all look the same. So a big mistake for me, that is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flick down until I find one that I think looks reasonably good for putting together. As you can see, I've gone vertical now. I'm starting to get some color in the sky, and I'm just looking at my base image. Yeah, it's still looking good. I quite like that one. That looks pretty interesting. So let's open this one up. And you can see I've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If we open up this image, you can see on the histogram that it's pretty well balanced. There's going over to the darks, into the shadow area. So if I go into develop, and we get these little tick boxes in the top corner, as I hover over that little tick box or ticket, you see that I've got all these shadows have gone into blacks, and there's no detail left in there. And if I go over to the highlights, there's nothing clipping the highlights, and you can see by the histogram. Okay, now if I go to the next image, which is the 2 overexposed, which is this one, you can see on the histogram, you can see on my details, I've got the information coming up here. So this is basically shot it at a 30th of a second, and this one's been shot at an 1/8 of a second, so it's let a lot more light in. Both at f9, they're both exactly the same that way. And with doing this, if you click on my shadow detail, nothing's clipping the shadows because I've got 2 overexposed, which is giving me some shadow detail down there by looking at the histogram on that side. And if you go over to the highlights, you can see that it has clipped the highlights, only just, but it's clipped the highlights and blowing away all those highlight details. And that is one thing you never ever want to do. You never want to shoot those highlight details. And again, if I go to one of the darker exposures, this one, you can see there's absolutely no highlights whatsoever being clipped on that side, but we have got a lot more black detail on the other side. So we need to try and balance this histogram if we want. So the best way of doing that for me at the moment, just for the first off thing, is to select all of these images. So click on the first one, and then click shift and click the next one, and then you get all those 5 highlighted. Then right click, go down to photo merge, HDR, and what this will do is it will take all 5 of those images, put those 5 images together, blend them into one image and stack them on top of each other, so you end up with one average exposure. Right, so it's done doing that. As you look at the image, you can see we've got some detail down here in the bottom. We've got all the highlights are kept in the top. So we're just going to merge that, click merge, and it will take a few moments for it to turn it into an image. And then once it's done, we'll have a look at that one and edit that, because that's going to be the best histogram. Hopefully when it's finished doing what it's doing, and you can see up in the top corner, it's creating that HDR image, you'll get a TIFF file. And then if we look at the histogram then should give us a more balanced, pretty much a more even center weighted histogram, hopefully all going well. There we go, it's now made a HDR DNG, so that's our digital negative. And if you look at the histogram, as you see there, like I said, we've got now much more of a peak in the middle, so we've got more detail in the area we want to work with. We've got no clipping highlights, which is really good, and we've got a little bit of shadow. If you just click on there, you can see there's a little bit of shadow detail that's just gone into the blacks in that bottom corner, but we can fix that later on in Photoshop. So we can flick over to Photoshop to just merge that little area that we want to do and bring that back if we need to. Okay, so we're going to work on this image and just see what we can do. I don't mind this bottom area being a little bit dark. It's all about these colours in the top here and the little bits of snow on the side, which is really, really quite pretty. So my first thing, and you'll also see there, because I had it ticked to auto edit, it would actually edit it the way it thinks it wants to edit it. So you can see it's brought up the shadows, dropped the highlights, and a little bit of vibrance and stuff like that. So it's actually edited the image out it thinks it wants to edit the image, which is not a bad looking image, to be honest. This is the most important area, this part along here, because we want to try and keep this sharp. You can see there's a slight little bit of something going on along this edge, just a little bit of something that could be to do with the merging and sticking them together. So it's worth keeping an eye on to make sure that everything stitches, but from this distance you can't see that. Now I've got some presets set up on this corner, as you can see down the left hand side, and one of my presets I have actually called HDR. Now if I hover over it, from what it says to what I say, first of all it's doing like a lens correction and stacking them all, because you can see the actual image is shrinking as I put my slider over it. But what it's doing is, that's the kind of image that I want. I've got that set up, so I'm gonna hover over the others. I've got landscape set up. I've got some warm rocks. You can see it's gone very warm. I've got woodland flat, and I've got woodland flat with grain, and I've also got Fuji green. So for best for me, I'm going for a more neutral. I'm going to use my HDR, and all it is to set up one of these profiles and make your own is you go down your settings and you set them up. Pretty much I've gone 100% highlights down, which is trying to control all these bright parts. I've got near enough, I've got 90% shadows up, which is pulling all my shadow detail up. I've got a little tiny bit of clarity, and I've also got a little bit of dehaze in there, a little bit of sharpening to the textures, and then I've got a little tiny bit of highlighting, bringing the lights up. So that's basically how I've got this set up, and I tend to use this as my first off port. Plus you'll notice, if I hover over another one, you'll notice this vignette I've got around it as well. So if I go down to my post-crop vignetting, I see I've got quite a strong -25 vignette. So that actually gives me a vignette at the same time. So it'll also, I think you'll find if I go into details, it also corrects my sharpening. So I've got a mask. If you put your finger on Alt and hold the mask, you can see my mask is quite a strong mask at 83%. So it's only masking the edges of it. And then I've got my sharpening right up to 88. And then my detail slider right down. But I'm actually going to whack that detail slider to the top this time. This is where I'm going to change. It makes a few edits. So it should be doing some sharpening around the edges of the frame. So again, if I press Alt, press on there, and that's the bit that's actually working on sharpening. So it does that as well for me. Any other things in there might be a little bit of color grading, luminosity at all, hue. There's a tiny little bit of hue in there from the greens and the yellows. It's just pulling them up just a little bit, but that's all set in that preset. So basically you'll edit a basic preset, you'll get it to the way you want to get it to, and once it's looking the way you want it to look, if it's something you're going to use regularly, then you just go over to the positive and click add, and it will add that preset, and you just save it in a name you want, and that's how you build your own personal presets on the side. And that's pretty much what I do. All right, let's have a little look at this image. As the image stands, it looks pretty good as it is. Now I would normally put this tree right slap bang in the middle, but because this is highlighted with the snow, it's quite nice in having it in a slightly different angle, because it's opened up all these lovely colours in the bottom there. Now I'm quite happy with that, apart from the fact that down here this looks really, really dark. So it might be worth just pulling the shadows up even more, right as far as they'll come, and getting as much as that detail down at the bottom there. And so that's 100% to the top. That's full maximum HDR, but I still think it's quite nice. If you want to do different parts of it, you can, but I'm quite happy with that image on its own. But now what we'll have a look and just change a few sliders to see if it makes any difference. So we can take the clarity down. You can see by bringing the clarity down, it's changing the sky and making the sky look a lot softer, but brightening it up as well. Might be something you quite like, or you can go the other way and make the sky look really dark and foreboding and moody. For me, I'm going to back that clarity slider, the dehaze slider, off just a little bit, just to bring it down from the 25 to the 14. It just brings a bit more highlight back up there and a little bit more natural looking. Also the clarity, let's just have a little look and see what the clarity does. You can bring the clarity down, that softens the image, pump the clarity up and makes it really crispy. Again, I think I'm just going to lift the clarity up just a little bit to make it look a little bit more crispy, because I like the crispiness in the water. If you just look at the water, if you bring it down and then bring it all the way up, you can see how crispy that water looks when you bring it up, and I just quite like that little crispiness just going on in that water down there. So I quite like that. It's also pulling out these little highlights down here on the snow, as you can see down on that bottom part. And what I focused on is I focused on this tree, so hopefully the tree is all nice and sharp. You've got to watch these little halos here. You'll find by dropping your highlights all the way and lifting your shadows, you get this little halo around the tree. But if you zoom back out, it's not very noticeable, and I think it works quite well. Now, there's not a lot more I do with this image, to be honest, at all. I'm quite happy with the way that looks. So I'm going to call that one it for that. And you can see how well the histogram's now balanced. If you look at the histogram, we've got no clipping highlights. We can click on there. There's nothing clipping on the highlights. And if we go over to our shadows, there's absolutely nothing clipping on those shadows. We've drawn all those shadows out. The only thing you could do, if you really fancied it, is maybe go into your tone curve, and go to the blacks in the bottom corner and just lift those blacks up slightly and just pull that corner up. And what it will do is it will just take a bit of softness off the blacks to just soften the image slightly and make it a little bit more neutral. And I quite like that as an image goes. I'm just going to zoom in just to check the dark area. And yeah, I quite like it. You can see there is details down here. Now, one thing it has definitely done here, and it looks very prominent on that bit there, is it's almost doubled the image. It's duplicated the image slightly, just there and just here. I've just noticed. So it might be worth just doing a redo on the image stacking. Yeah, you can see there. You can see, look at this image stacking there. It's just, what it's done is it's just moved everything slightly where the tree was moving. So where it's stacked the image, it's just made it a little bit out. So what we're going to do now then, we're going to go back in and process the image again, but we're just going to pick the one image to process and work on that. So I'm just going to click 1 to score that as a 1. So I know that's the one we're going to work on. And then I'm going to go back to grid, which is a G. Now, this is the finished image, and the images are stacked behind it. You can see it's automatically stacked them. So if I unstack them, I'm going to work on the average image, because I think we can get out just as good as an image of this with the standard image, I think. So again, go into that one, press D for develop, and it's going to bring up my standard image. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is hit my HDR like that, and you can see it's done exactly the same thing. It's put all the same settings in, everything as before, but this time we're going to bring down our dehaze again slightly. We're going to bring up our clarity a little bit. The dehaze might need to come down just a little bit more this time. And then we are going to pump our shadows all the way up. And I do want a little bit more clarity. I think I want more clarity at the bottom, but not at the top. So I'm going to leave it where it is, and we're going to use a slider and a mask and just do the bottom half of the image. My whites I'm quite happy with, because nothing's down there, but we still lost a little bit of detail in the black. So again, I'm just going to pull that bottom corner up a little bit, just to try and get those blacks up a little bit. And then let's have a little look. We can flick between the two. So we go for our left and right button. That's our DNG. You can see there it's DNG. And that is our standard image. Now I think that isn't bad. The only difference between my one and that one is you're getting a little bit more black detail on that side. So we just need to pull those out a little bit, which we can do by bringing the lights up a little bit. So we can expose it a little bit more and then bring our whites down maybe. And each time we're dragging it across. You can even get hold of the slider and drag this across. You can get hold of this end of the histogram and drag that out. And then I think our main, we're going to bring the light down. So by using the histogram, you can actually balance out your photograph literally by dragging your histogram to where you want it to be. So let's just go between the other image. That's that one, and the HDR one. And then we just flick over to ours. I think that looks pretty similar, and I'm quite happy with it. And then when we go zooming in on this one, you can see down here, we haven't got this double line down here. We haven't got this double line down here going on. And when we go up to the tree top, we haven't now got any double lines going on these trees like we had before. So we'll go back over to the other one, zoom in on the top of the tree. and you can see wherever it's gone. This is our DNG. It was on there just now because I could see it. There it is. We've got these little bits of lines there that are just spoiling the image, where you've got this double fringing. So that can be put right. You can go into Photoshop and you can do different layers and actually paint them out and stuff like that. But I think we've got a pretty decent image just from that one. So it's quite an easy way of doing it. Like I say, if I wanted to get a little bit more clarity in the bottom, I'm going to open up a layer mask, and then we're going to do, let's do a brush. What we're going to do is we're going to brush on a bit of clarity. So we'll brush on the area we want, which is going to be highlighted in red. So all this area is going to be highlighted in red. We just want it all around this area. So once we've got it in that area, we're going to go over to our clarity slider and just pull our clarity up, and you can see what it's doing to that water. If I go down and then up, you can see it's pulling that detail in the water and making the water look crispy and sharp. Not to everyone's taste, but I think because I've got these nice highlights there and the tones, I think it works quite nicely. And if you want a little bit more, you can just put a little bit down here in the bottom as well, and we'll just brush it in where I want to brush it in. But I think that's worked quite nicely. Okay, and there's my mask. You can see my mask is there. If you wanted to do a bit more at the top, bring the tones down, or lighten this top corner, you can actually get another, you click add, go into a gradient, and you can just put a gradient in the top there and just pull them shadows up maybe, and just lift, take that darkness out of that top corner, or put a bit of light in there just to bring those colors back in, and it's starting to pull out this red in this top corner. You can even put a little bit of clarity in there just to draw that out, and let's just lift them shadows up a little bit as well, because we don't really want it too dark in this top corner, but we do want to see these nice reds and the nice tones. So I think that works quite nicely. Anything else we do before we drop it and close it? No, I'm quite happy with that. So we just click on there, closes that down, and there's our finished item. So I'm going to star that as a 3 because I'm happy with that one, and that means when I go back into my catalogue, I can see that anything with 3 stars then is good, that I've worked on. I know I've got that one that's been worked on, and then all these others are the same. You know, you can keep them all and look at them after. So if we've got another image we can have a little bit of a look at. I did actually zoom in, didn't I? Do some close-up ones. I wonder if we can work on one of these. Let's have a look at this one. So it's very, very bright in that corner. Go into develop. Let's click on the old, yeah, it's quite bright in there. But again, we can click on our HDR. We can click that and see if it makes any difference. And you can see how it's pulled all these tones together and just made everything work in that one single click on that HDR slider. And again, you can just balance it. Then you can adjust it. You can bring things down and add a little bit of clarity and things and crispness, you know, and just try and work on it. Do we want some shadows? Do you want the shadows higher or lower? It's actually quite nice to have a little bit of shadows in this image because it needs to be dark down here. And then we can drop the whites, so that's not too bright. But what you'll see is how the histogram has balanced itself. Now I've got no highlights clipping. My raw file, I managed to save all these highlights in this area, and they seem to be okay. And I do like this little area just there in the mountains. So again, very easily done. I'll click that with a 3 to save that one. Let's go back into grid by pressing G. Let's just have another little look down here and see if there's anything else I quite like. We could go up to one of the other images, one of the flat ones. So let's have a look at, I just wanted to give you a quick idea of all I do with my editing. So let's pick on one of the cooler images. Let's have a look at this one, see what this one's like. That's very cool. You can see all the blues are over near the highlights. So again, it's pretty much all in. There's a couple of little swans on the water as well. But let's just process this one for image. So let's go into develop or press D. Once we're in develop, first thing I'm going to do, like always, is I'm going to go over to my sliders and just hover over them and see what they do. And I think it's going to be the standard I always use. It's going to be my HDR, because at the end of the day, I always lift my shadows up and drop my highlights. You can do it all manually. If you don't like it, reset it, go back to the beginning and do it all manually. You can lift your shadows up. You can see your shadows come all the way up, and you can drop your highlights down. And what that's doing is the highlights are controlling the sky and the bright parts, and then you can work on, you know, more contrast, less contrast. You can work on clarity and give it that. But I've got all that built in one easy quick sweep, and it just brings it to a head, basically to where I want it. What I think with this image, I think we need to bring it down a little bit, just drop it, and then we can actually drag this again with So we're going to drag that away from the highlights, and we're going to pull our shadow detail up. So now my histogram's quite balanced. You can see how blue this is. Now if you don't like it blue, you can go into shoot cloudy, and it will tend to give it a lot of a warmer feel. You can shoot daylight, and what it's doing is it's basically putting a filter over it. Daylight, it just looks too warm. So I'm going to go back to the natural. Auto, let's have a look and see what auto puts it back on. Auto thinks it should look like that, and again, I know it wasn't. I know it was very cool. It was a very blue morning because it was still waiting for the light to come up. So we're going to use the blue tone that we're getting anyway. And I'm even going to drop it down a bit darker because I think it was quite dark at the time. And the only area I'm concerned about is that little bright area there. You can see it's not too good. Now, if you go over to my darker exposure, which is going to be this one, you'll see that that area is more controlled. There's a more color in that area, so doing a blend again might pull that out and bring it out. But yeah, I'm quite happy with that as a basic image. I think if I'd use this one, which is my basic raw image, because that was the actual 2 overexposed, do the same again, go into there, I should get a better controlled histogram as I do. So by using the right one, so pull those shadows away from that bottom corner. My computer's just about to crash. There we go. Let's try again. Pull them shadows away from that bottom corner, and then pull them highlights down the best we can. And I think that's going to be as simple as it is. And I don't go too mad with my images. I don't find that I need to go crazy with them. I just mess around with things just to see. So I quite like lifting the highlights up, but then you get that burnt area. So by dropping my whites down, I'm just controlling this area here a little bit. But again, I'm going to score that with a 1. Go back into my grid, and I think I'm going to call that it. I think the best image really was the one that I processed. It got more detail in it and a lot more color with that vertical shot. So I'm going to call it on that one and leave it there. More than not, I normally use that HDR merge because I always tend to draw my shadows up, getting as much detail in shadows, and my highlights down. A raw image is very flat, very basic. You do need to do something with it. So by doing that, it helps give me a little bit more contrast. It sets the image up and it sets the workflow up. If I don't like it once I've done it, I'll go back and start again. And you can see the HDR, if nothing's moving in an image, the HDR definitely works better because you get an instant balanced histogram. You can put in the lights and the shadows and the darks, and the computer works it out for you. So that's a good way to start. It's just a shame that tree's moving and you've got that slight fringing where the tree's moved. You might not notice it, but once you do, you can't take your eyes off of it. So I hope that helped. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to see me do more stuff like this, do let me know. It's not something I enjoy doing because sitting in a computer is not what I want to do. I want to sit out there. But on situations like this, I know it can be quite helpful and handy to people. So very, very simple. Nothing posh. Nothing clever. Just a simple HDR, a little bit of toning, and a happy image. Ta-da. See you soon.